I gave my family over $42,000, skipped meals to pay their bills. And when my grandfather died, they left me with fishing gear and debt. That's when I snapped. The text came in at 7:02 a.m. Mortgage is due. No greeting. No hi, Ross. Not even a question mark. Just a cold command from my mother, Marjorie. Like I was still their bank account in a button-down shirt. I sat at my kitchen table in Denver, staring at the screen until it went dark. Then I turned my eyes to the frame beside me. An old photo of Grandpa Orson and me by the lake, fishing poles in hand, smiles sunburned into our faces. He'd been gone 2 weeks. Just 2. My phone buzzed again, this time from my father. I didn't look. Instead, I reached for the mug in front of me, coffee long since gone cold, and thought about everything I had given up for people who couldn't even look me in the eye at the funeral. When I was 20, I worked the night shift at Denny's. I'd go to school from 8 to 2, flip burgers from 4 to midnight, sleep 3 hours, then do it all over again. I sent half my paycheck home so Tonia could focus on her dream degree in interior design. She'd just turned 17 and had never held a job in her life. "You're the big brother," my mother would say. "She needs this opportunity." At 22, I was juggling full-time work and night classes to get my accounting degree. I remember coming home one night, exhausted, only to see Tonia post a picture on Instagram. Shopping bags from Chanel, captioned retail therapy. She dropped out that year. Twice. No one said a word to her. I kept my mouth shut too. That's what I did. I was the responsible one. By 26, I had finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest condo. No parties. No vacations. Just grinding and budgeting like my life depended on it. That was when my dad called. "Emergency repairs," he said. "Roof's leaking." I wired him $5,000 that same night. No questions. No thank you text either. And then Grandpa Orson got sick. I moved into his apartment when he started forgetting things, missing meals, taking pills twice. I fed him, shaved him, read to him every night. While my parents couldn't bear to see him like that. I was the one changing his bedsheets at 3 a.m. Until just before he died, then my parents started showing up more to give me some relief. I was surprised but thankful. Little did I know that they were up to no good. Grandpa died with his hand in mine, whispering my name. Or what I hoped was my name. At the funeral, my mother barely looked at me. Tonia came late in designer sunglasses. My father made a show of hugging the priest, but walked right past me. I figured they were grieving in their own way. I didn't figure on the will. We gathered in a lawyer's office the next week. Wood paneling. The smell of old paper and polished lies. I sat alone while Marjorie and Calix sat beside Tonia, arms crossed like they already knew what was coming. "Mr. Ross Maynard," the lawyer read, "is to receive Orson Maynard's personal effects, his book collection and fishing equipment." That was it. My hands went cold. Meanwhile, my parents got the house. Tonia got a $60,000 lump sum for her future endeavors. And I, Ross, who cleaned Orson's bedpans and read him poetry when his mind was slipping, got a box of dusty Hemingway and a pair of old reels. I waited, hoping there'd been a mistake. But the lawyer simply cleared his throat and said, "That concludes the reading." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just walked out. 2 days later, the text came in. "Mortgage is due." Not even a pause to let me grieve. I didn't reply right away. I paced my apartment. I made tea. I reread the will. I looked at Grandpa's fishing rod propped up in the corner and wondered if he even knew what they did to his signature. Then, for the first time in my life, I wrote back without guilt. "I can't help you anymore." That was it. No explanation. No paragraph-long justifications. Just the truth. I turned off my phone after that. That night, I sat on the balcony with Orson's copy of The Old Man and the Sea. I flipped to a page he'd underlined years ago. A man can be destroyed but not defeated. I finally understood what it meant. My family never saw what I gave up for them. They never saw the overdrafts, the unpaid dentist visits, the way I wore shoes until the soles cracked because Tonia needed another semester or Mom. just needed help catching up on the car. I was never the golden child. I was the dependable one. The one who picked up the tab, stayed quiet, and played hero while everyone else played victim. But that text? That was the day I stopped being the good son. What happened next forced me to make the hardest decision of my life. And once I made it, there was no going back. They had always called me the responsible one, but what they really meant was expendable. The summer I turned 16, I saved up every dollar from my lawn mowing gigs and late-night shifts at the movie theater. I had one goal: buy a used car before senior year started. After 10 months of saving, I handed over $2,700 for a rusted Toyota Corolla with a dented door and a cassette player that only worked when it felt like it. I didn't care. It was mine and I earned it. But the year Tonia had her 16th birthday, I came home from work to find the driveway blocked by balloons, banners, and the unmistakable curve of a brand new BMW SUV wrapped in a red bow. Tonia screamed, cried, threw herself into our father's arms. Mom recorded the whole thing on her iPad, tears streaming down her own face. Dad saw me standing at the edge of the garage, still in my grease-stained uniform, and clapped me on the shoulder and spoke to the others. Ross doesn't need help, he's the responsible one. That line would follow me well into adulthood. Let us know where you're watching us from. And if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. You have nothing to lose and it will mean the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. When I moved to Denver at 28, it wasn't to escape. At least, that's what I told myself. I landed a junior accountant role at a mid-sized firm, rented a modest apartment near Cheeseman Park, and biked to work most days to save on gas. My coworkers bought lunch out. I packed leftovers. They took vacations. I forwarded my paid time off to cover long weekends helping at home. Then I met Miley. We bumped into each other at a budgeting seminar of all places. She was leading it. She had this sharp wit, an easy laugh, and a no-nonsense way of talking about money that made even the driest tax code sound interesting. We went out for coffee afterward, then dinner, then walks. Over time, she became my sounding board, my mirror. One night, after I'd wired Tonia $800 for a rent crisis, for the second time in 2 months, I vented to her over the phone. She didn't say much at first. Then she asked gently, "Ross, do you write down every time they ask for money?" I paused. "Why would I?" "Because if you did," she said, "you'd realize this isn't normal. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken." That's when I started journaling. In 6 months, I logged 17 separate requests, some large, some small. Gas money here. A surprise dental bill there. Just this once became, "We knew we could count on you." It wasn't just the money. It was the expectation, the entitlement, and the silence that followed every transaction, like I'd done nothing more than fulfill my duty. The truth about the will came out almost by accident. Dan, my best friend since college, called me on a Thursday evening while I was meal prepping for the week. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Should I be? Remember Sylvie Grange?" That name made me pause. Sylvia was Orson's old neighbor, widowed, chatty, and the unofficial gossip hotline of their street. "She was at the post office today and cornered me," Dan continued. "Said she was sorry to hear Orson changed his will before he passed. Apparently, she overheard your parents talking about the will change in the store. They didn't realize she was in the next aisle." My knife stopped mid-chop. Now I understood why they suddenly showed interest in relieving me of the burden of caring for Orson. It all made perfect sense now. I was really shocked when the will was read, but I bore Orson no grudges, I said slowly. "Well, Orson's will that was read wasn't the one he left. Sylvie swears she heard them talking about changing the will." I stared at the calendar on my fridge. Gosh, parents are devious. And I believed them. God help me, I actually believed them. I confronted my mother the next day. Her voice was smooth, controlled, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "We all agreed it was for the best," she said. "You've got your own life, Ross. You don't need anything." I tried to respond, to ask why caring for Orson meant nothing. Why loyalty and sacrifice were worth less than bloodline convenience. But I couldn't find the words. That night, I took Orson's fishing rod and drove to Green Lake Park, where he first taught me to cast a line when I was 7. The pier was empty. The water shimmered under the pale Denver moon. I didn't fish. Just sat there and thought about the birthdays I forgot because I was covering shifts, about the weddings I skipped because plane tickets were too expensive, about the down payment I almost lost after bailing my dad out, about all the times I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. That's when it hit me. I was never the respected one. I was the reliable tool, the emotional ATM, the one who had it together, so they didn't have to. I gave without resentment, until there was nothing left but the echo of their demands and my hollowed-out self. Miley's words came back to me that night. Patterns can be broken, and in that moment, something shifted. Not all at once, but I could feel the dam cracking. Years of guilt and blind loyalty threatening to burst. I didn't know it yet, but I was one step from cutting them all off. It started with an Instagram post. Tonia, sipping from a coconut, lounging in a private Bali villa, sun-kissed and smug, captioned the photo, "Self-care queen." I stared at the screen in silence. The colors were perfect. Her smile wide. Hashtags like hashtag rest and recharge and hashtag worth it danced beneath the image. The same day, just 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Mom, sobbing. "Ross, please," she said between broken breaths. "We're 2 months behind. We could lose the house. Your father's so stressed, he's barely sleeping. Please. Just this once." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at my laptop, then at the spreadsheet I had open, ironically titled Debt Recovery Plan. I'd been trying, cutting back, budgeting, rebuilding what they had drained. Her voice trembled through the phone, but it didn't move me the way it used to. I wasn't cold. I wasn't heartless. I was exhausted. I hung up without committing. Then I opened a blank email. The words poured out like a flood. I wrote about every loan I'd given that was never repaid. Every phone call that came only when someone needed something. Every promise made and broken. I wrote about Grandpa Orson. About how I'd fed him soup while he coughed through chemo, while the rest of the family talked about inheritance behind closed doors. I wrote about my loneliness, my therapy, my guilt. And then I hit send. I blocked every number, Mom's, Dad's, Tonia's. Silence at last. It didn't last long. 2 days later, Aunt Rhonda called from a different number. "Ross, what are you doing? Your mother's in tears. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. You're going to give him a heart attack. Is that what you want?" No, it wasn't what I wanted, but it also wasn't my responsibility anymore. Then came the email from Uncle James. Subject: Family comes first. I knew the tone before I even opened it. Family is everything, Ross. You don't turn your back on your blood. Don't be selfish. We all go through hard times. You've always been the rock. Why change now? I didn't respond. Then I saw Tonia's Instagram again. A new post. A selfie with a snide little smirk. Captioned: "The family ATM is out of service. SMH. She tagged it. Hashtag some people change. I almost laughed. Almost. But the next scene wasn't funny. I sat across from Dr. Tipton in her softly lit office. 3rd session in 3 weeks. She tapped the notebook on her lap. "This isn't helping family, Ross," she said. "This is financial abuse." The word hit harder than I expected. Abuse. "I let it happen," I whispered. "Yes," she said. "But you've survived it. And now you're healing." The tears came then. Years of buried frustration. Of being the one who handled things. Of never asking for anything. Of bending until I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just about money. It was about being seen. Or not. I walked out of that office lighter. Not free, but lighter. And I made a decision. I met with a financial advisor the next week. A no-nonsense woman named Lola who wore navy suits and never flinched, no matter how messy the numbers. She didn't judge. Just nodded, typed, and mapped out a recovery plan like a general preparing for war. We'll build back your savings, she said. Slow and steady. We'll invest smart. No more untracked withdrawals. You're taking your life back. At her suggestion, I opened a new savings account. I named it Freedom. Watching that first deposit, just a modest few $100s, hit the account made something shift in my chest. It wasn't just money. It was the start of a new chapter. Then, one Friday evening, as Miley and I were eating stir-fry and laughing at a ridiculous baking show, she paused and tilted her head. What's that? A slip of paper had been pushed under the door. I picked it up. Family meeting, Sunday at 5 p.m. Be there. No signature. No explanation. Just those 7 words. I stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling slightly between my fingers. They want to fix things, I said out loud. Miley raised an eyebrow. Or they want to corner you. I nodded slowly. They want to fix things, but on their terms. I folded the note carefully, placed it on the counter. And in my gut, I felt it, the slow coil of dread twisting tight. I had no idea it was an ambush. They called it a family meeting. I didn't know I was walking into a trial. The house smelled like cinnamon polish and dust. Familiar, but not warm. Cold in that way a childhood home becomes when it's no longer yours. I stepped inside and saw the setup. 5 chairs. All lined up, facing the empty couch like a courtroom. No snacks. No coffee. Just faces, tight with tension and expectation. My mother stood at the center. Hair freshly done, pearls at her neck, lips pressed together like a woman holding back both fury and tears. We just want to talk, she said. Tonia rolled her eyes and crossed her legs. We're family, Ross. You owe us. That word. Oh, as if every sacrifice had been a loan with compound interest. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, back straight, heart racing, but voice steady. I brought something. I pulled a folded printout from my jacket pocket. The same email I had sent weeks ago. I'd reread it a dozen times. This time I read it out loud, line by line, broken promise by broken promise. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just read the truth. When I was done, I looked them all in the eyes, one by one. You practically cut me out of Grandpa Orson's will, I said. I fed him when he was too weak to lift a spoon. I held his hand in the hospital. But you gave me books and fishing gear. You took the house, the money, the security. Dad flinched but said nothing. I held the paper up one more time. So consider this, my inheritance to myself. My peace, my money, my future. I folded it calmly, slid it back into my pocket. And I'm done bleeding for people who only show up when they're hungry. I turned to leave. No one followed. Weeks passed. Silence bloomed like spring after a harsh winter. Then an email. From Marjorie. Subject, we're managing. 2 words. No greeting. No sign-off. I stared at it for a while, then archived it without responding. A few days later, I saw a photo on Tonia's Instagram. She stood in a boxy gray office cubicle, coffee mug in hand, with a caption that read, "First real job ever. Time to hustle." No emojis. No sarcasm. Just reality. I move house. My new condo overlooked Sloan's Lake. It wasn't massive, but it was mine. Sleek. Clean. Painted in earth tones with big windows and just enough sunlight to make mornings feel like rebirth. Miley helped me decorate. She brought warmth into every corner. Throw pillows, a tiny succulent on the sill, little notes tucked in drawers I wouldn't find for weeks. She brought me some of her famous home-baked cookies one Saturday morning when I walked up to her, heart pounding. I went down on one knee without staging a production. I just handed her the ring box and said, "I want to build a life with you. One with boundaries. One with love. One where we're equal." She stared at me for a moment, eyes glistening. Then she smiled. Yes. A few days later, a relative that hadn't cut me off for standing up to my parents, Aunt Cass, called out of the blue. Her voice cracked midway through. "I just wanted to say, you were right. I should have spoken up. I saw what they were doing to you. But I stayed quiet because I didn't want to make waves. It's okay, I told her. And I meant it. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need fanfare. Just honesty. Then came a message from Cousin Mitch. We hadn't spoken in years. They leaned on me too, he wrote. I didn't have the guts to say no. You did. Respect, man. I was still rereading that message when another one came in. Tonia. Simple. Unexpected. Got my first raise. Did it myself. No emoji. No LOL. No snide jabs. Just a sentence. And maybe, just maybe, a beginning. I went hiking with Miley that weekend. We followed a trail up into the foothills, where the air was thin and clean, and the city looked like a toy landscape below. At the top, we sat on a boulder and shared a thermos of coffee. I pulled out Grandpa Orson's old fishing book. Pages yellowed, corners bent, his handwriting still crisp in the margins. I turned to one page I always loved, a note written next to a hand-drawn trout. Patience and stillness, Ross. That's the secret. He'd written it when I was 12. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. Boundaries don't mean you hate them. They mean you love yourself enough to stop bleeding for people who never stop taking. You can still hope they grow, still leave the door cracked. But you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And guess what? I'm still standing, stronger than ever. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. 1. Have you ever had to set boundaries with a family member? What pushed you to finally do it? 2. Do you think cutting off toxic family is selfish, or sometimes necessary for your mental health? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories coming up just for you.